So this is post-fire vegetation response by ecological site in Nevada, and a lot of this data is, or the majority of what you're going to see is from our data points off our ecological site work, our state and transition modeling work, but it also has some of Patty's data in it from her NRI work and from some monitoring work that she does as an NRCS employee. So the basis for discussion again is the MLRA scale level and the work that we've been doing in the ecological state and transition modeling work. And again, 310 field notes in 28A and 28B, 115 and 25, 78 and 24. And I didn't tell you, but we did 74 field notes in MLRA 23 last summer, so we brought that into this discussion. So what is in a field note? Soil site correlation. So my favorite soil scientist down on his hands and knees confirming that we are on the ecological site that is supposedly mapped on that location. Do we find that sometimes that mapping is incorrect? It is a big piece of land with a crayon that they have drawn around there. So you really do need to verify site. And so we do verify site. Species composition by weight, production, rangeland health indicates the state and the phase. The soil scientist will do a soil description with a 20-inch pit. That's what we dig. Okay, we're not doing the full enchilada. Photos and GPS points, so we have a shapefile of every point we've ever been to that's tied to the data that we collect. And any notes that we feel are necessary. What has been the disturbance history? What have we noted? Like in this particular location that we were at, there was a windmill and a water trough about a half mile off. So that goes into the notes, into the database. And so this describes what we've done, where we've been, how we've been there, and what we saw. And in our notes, we're going to have in there what state we think we're in, what community phase we think we're in, and why we think that. So, MLRA descriptions. It's really important to understand these things. There is a reason why those MLRAs are differentiated. Okay? And it comes back to resistance and resilience. And our data really supports that. After we went back and we started looking through all the field notes we've taken over the last 4 years, we are seeing major differences at the MLRA scale. So if you just look at MLRA 23, on average, elevation is 3,900 to 6,900 feet. We have some mountains that go up pretty tall. It is, look at the soils, young andesite and basalt, a lot of volcanic ash influenced soils. That's really critical in restoration, to know if you have volcanic ash influenced soils. It makes a difference. 6 to 12 inch precip zone on average, but you get up in those mountains and you can be up to 57 inches. So where are you on the landscape? Aridosols and mollisols primarily, mesic soil temperatures, and an auritic or xeric soil moisture regime. If you're working in the range world, you need to know your soils. Your degree specialty might be natural resources or rangeland science. Get as much soils into your background as you possibly can. Really encourage you to do that. Compare that to ML, so this is 23, this blue thing, and then 24 is this little light green spot. So if you look at 24, the elevation range is similar. It's a little lower in elevation. Mountains aren't quite as high, but it's a wide type valley formations filled with alluvian and lacustrine materials. I see that. If I had never been there, I see that and I'm going to think Pleistocene lakes. That's just going to come into my head. This area was under the influence of ancient lakes. You have to know something about soils to pull that out of your head, but that's what's going to come to mind. Playas, oh yeah, okay, it was lakes then, okay? 6 to 12 inch precip, 40 inches in the mountains, so that's not as wet up in the mountains as 23. Aridosols are dominant, so okay, that goes back to moistures. You gotta have grass to create mollisols. That's just all there is to it. And a mesic soil temperature and an auritic soil moisture. So I'm already starting to see differences. Which one's more resilient? On average. This is the classroom now. Okay? 23. Okay? Then we get up to 25. So 25 is this bright green thing over here. 3,000 to 7,550, 9840 in the mountains. We don't have that lake influence in 25. That's a major difference. Volcanic rock and limestone deposits. We're getting some limestone, particularly down here where it borders 28, down on this area. 7 to 16 inches, so a little bit wetter precip zone than 23 or 24, really. Iridosols and mollisols again. Mesic or frigid. Okay, we're getting a little colder, a little bit colder. Aeritic or xeric soil moisture. And then we drop down into 28. Elevation's going up on average. We're getting pretty tall in the mountains. We're getting alluvial fans on those mountains, so big tall mountains with alluvial fans on the toe slopes coming down. Uplifted mountains, andesite, basalt, and carbonate rocks. So again, that limestone issue going on down there. And you get indosols in, very undeveloped soils, very young soils. Mesic or frigid soil temps, so cold, aeritic or xeric soil moisture, carbonatic mineralogy, mixed or carbonatic. Those things are important from a plant perspective. So right away, I'll throw out one example. If I have carbonatic mineralogy, I do not have Thurber's needlegrass. You should know that immediately if you're going to go down and work down there. That species goes off the I expect to find you list. Okay? So this comes from our notes. MLRA 23. Now we've only been up in that, we are not done with that MLRA. So our field notes are not done. We spent a lot of time on the Rush Fire. That burned in, was that 2012, I believe? Yeah. Burned in 2012 outside of Susanville, California. That place is a disaster, by the way. It is an ecological moonscape. So our notes misrepresent probably what the whole MLRA looks like. It's heavy to the annual grass component right now. But 59% had a bromus tectorum, and it should say and or medusa head present. So our preliminary look says 11% of the area had an annual state in it. It may stay there, may go down. We're not done there. But it's volcanic ash influenced also. 24 we're done with. We've seen 24. 70.5% of the sites we visited had bromus tectorum present, and 83% of the ecological sites that we modeled, which we are done modeling 24, have an annual state in them. If you think back about the descriptions of those MLRAs, that was the least resilient of all the ones that we just described. So in the Wyoming sagebrush type, in 24, if you get a fire, you are I would say you're 85 to 90% certain if you don't have a Sandberg's bluegrass understory, you are going to have cheatgrass. End of story. Okay? That's area just is not resilient. If you have a Wyoming sagebrush type in 25, MLRA 25, it is more resilient. I'm not going to tell you you're not going to have cheatgrass, but your opportunities are greater for restoration. So in 25, 37% of the sites had bromus tectorum present. Big difference between 24 and 25. 41% of the ecological sites had an annual state. Different place. 28A and B, 52% of the sites had bromus tectorum present. We're not done modeling here yet, so I'm not ready to tell you this number yet. And 28A, 45% of the sites had an annual state. Well, maybe I am. And 51% of the sites had an annual state. These aren't out the door yet.
Next week.
Next week. We'll call this preliminary. So this 24 is very lightning. There's a high frequency of lightning in the 24-25 corridor. That area burns a lot. It just does. Right. 28A and B is where we grow trees. That's our pinyon juniper world. It doesn't burn as much. That may change, but it's not where we tend to get a lot of fires. So this is the heart of cheatgrass world for Nevada. And this one, being less resilient, is the one that really converts on us. So why the difference? Precip patterns, lightning, winter-summer differences in precipitation, parent material plays a big role. Soil properties, ash, chemistry of the soil, organic matter, soil temperature and soil moisture regime, and fire history. We can't hang our hat on one. That's why disturbance response groups, I think, are important, because they capture all of that. If we look just at the percent of total precipitation falling in the summer, and you look at, this is 28B right here. The yellow represents more summer precip, and the red represents less summer precip. So this would be winter precip in 24, winter precip in 25, and then as you come down towards 28, you're getting more your rain in the summer. Does that matter to a grass plant? Especially a C3 grass plant? Matters a lot. If you look at it in just strictly numbers, if you look over here, winter, spring precip, summer, fall precip. If you look at Winnemucca, which is in MLRA 24, 64% of the rain is coming in the winter and early spring, 36% in the summer, fall. But look at the inches. Less than 3 inches in the summer, fall period. And I guarantee you that's fall, not summer. Cheatgrass is a winter annual. It's loving this situation, and the perennials that we try to plant after fire are hating life. You know, especially in that 8 to 10 inch precip zone, it's not easy to make a living. We're going to do a lot better down here where Cody likes to work and tear things up, where we have some rain in the summer to work with. Makes you look like a restoration god, you know. So I would really encourage you to work in this part of the world if you want to tear things up. Hi, Cody. So this is some of what our data is telling us right now. This is MLRA 28 on burn sites with soil temperature that is in the music range. We're kind of all over the board, except for, you know, we had, this is only an N of 8. That's not a large sample, okay? And these are the states we put them into. We had one that went back to reference after fire, one that's in current potential after fire, one that's in a shrub state, so that's going to be a really old fire, 3 that are in an annual state, 1 that's in a seeded state, and 1 we apparently didn't know what to do with.
We didn't know where it was going.
Which means it was a new fire. It was black. Okay. Burn sites with a frigid soil temperature. So N of 12, 1 that's in reference, 5 that are in current potential, 2 that are in shrub, 1 that's in annual state, 2 that are seeded, 1 that's gone back to a tree state. It's a mixed bag. How do you know where it's going? How do you know? You know, Cody said he's going to use these models. He's going to use them when he goes out there to make planning decisions on what he's going to do. How does he know what he's going to do? What is the one piece of information you really want? You know what disturbance response group you're in, so you already have an understanding of the soils and stuff, climate, and you're going to walk out there to make your planning decision. What is the one thing you want to know? You guys have any ideas? How about what is the plant community I'm standing in? What state am I currently in? Because that tells you, I'm in this box and I want to go here. So if you have a lot of cheatgrass in the understory, I would advise you not to light it on fire. How's that? Or don't do a lot of soil disturbance. because you have a really viable seed bed in the soil, I can guarantee you. Okay? So this is some of the lessons we've learned. One fire is one thing, 2 fires is another thing, and 3 fires is an entirely different thing. And oftentimes the response is exponential. It is not linear. So 1 fire will definitely injure or kill plants, and it may cause some soil damage. The second, and we're talking in a short time frame, like say 20 years. The second fire will eliminate whatever residual plants may have survived the first fire. And you may convert to weed domination, being weed dominated at that point in time, if you didn't the first time around. By the time you get around to the third fire, your plant cover will be significantly reduced, and in Nevada, we usually get to this. And this is a third fire scar right here. And the cover that you see growing there is Burr buttercup. So we don't even grow cheatgrass on this site anymore, because the seed bank for cheatgrass is now gone. And we grow Burr buttercup, which lasts for, 3 or 4 weeks, and then it's gone, and then the soil just blows. Okay? So I would really caution you about just saying, well, fire does this. It's like grazing does this. It's no, what fire are we talking about? Okay? So in the stuff that we've looked at in our notes, in MLRA 23, we have 74 notes that we saw one burn in the past 30 years, and 1 note that there was more than 1 burn. But in 24, we had notes that we had 5 fires that there were at least 2 burns or more in the last 30 years. And in 25, 3. And in 28 A and B, there weren't any that had burned more than once. So we have a different pattern of fire exposure right now. And we had 310 notes. So let's look a little bit of response here, just by different soils. This is an ashy sandy loam. This has a lot of ash in it. This was a one-time fire. It's the first time it ever burned. It is a 10 to 12, and they did not seed it. It is beautiful. I wish everything looked like this after fire. This is a blue bunch wheatgrass, Thurber's needlegrass, and it is still blue bunch wheatgrass and Thurber's needlegrass. It's certainly missing the shrubs. And shrubs are gone right now. Burned in 2012. So it might be a while before we get shrubs back in, but overall this looks really nice. This is a clayey 10 to 14. This is the second time it's burned in the last 20 years in this particular location, and this was July 2012. This is horsebrush, so it's a sprouter. This is primarily Medusa head and cheatgrass. In places on this fire, it's over 1,500 pounds per acre of Medusa head. We are definitely over that ecological threshold. This is MLRA 23. It's a loamy 8 to 10. This was on private property. So this was the Holloway fire. So this was some of Patty's work with a private rancher. So this is November 2013, and this is July 2012, so different times a year. Species composition in 2013, perennial forbs was 7%, perennial grasses 17%, annual forbs 17%, shrubs 7%, and Bromus tectorum was 52%. The rancher went ahead and grazed it in July after the fire. So there wasn't really any, it was a year after the fire, he didn't rest it. Look at what happened with the Bromus tectorum. That was a gutsy move on his part. So I'm not sure what his utilization was on that pasture, but probably not real heavy. But he's still appears to be knocking the cheatgrass down, and his perennial grass is staying about the same. So from his perspective, he's not doing any damage. And he's reducing bromus tectorum. This is a map we use when we're out. This was in 24 when we were out doing ecological site work, doing the state and transition stuff. This is a 3-time burn scar right here. Our GIS specialist puts this together for us. This is area that's burned twice. Here. The lighter stuff, this stuff here is burned once. So these are soil map units. So this gives us the ability to go and look at disturbances. I want to look at a 3-time burn. I want to look at a 2-time burn. I want to look at a 1-time burn within the similar soil map units or same soil map units, see what the responses are. And we make a point of doing that. This is MLRA 24. This is a Wyoming sagebrush, Sandberg's bluegrass. We modeled this as state 3. So it's a shrub state with a Sandberg's bluegrass understory. There is a lot of this in MLRA 24, where you don't have a Thurber's needlegrass understory. You have a Wyoming sage in place. This is an extreme example, but you have Wyoming sagebrush in place with Sandberg's as the dominant grass in the understory. When that system burns, you do not get cheatgrass necessarily. Sandberg's holds the site really well. Be very careful if you're a land manager of deciding you're going to drill this, because Sandberg's also competes with whatever you're going to drill. But the point being, it's going to hold the site from cheatgrass, and you really don't want to do any damage to that plant after fire. That's my opinion. You want that. The last thing we want to do is help cheatgrass get a foot. So if this species can hold the site, let's let this species hold the site. Remember that 3-time burn picture I showed you? See the dirt blowing? This was the fence line right here where the dirt was blowing. You can walk up and step over the top of that fence without any problem. This is tremendous soil loss. This site's gone. They had to turn this into an ATV park. Up in 25, usually our seeding success in the loamy 8 to 10 is pretty good. This is an older crested wheatgrass seeding. You can see the sagebrush in it coming back in, but not always. You know, sometimes things go gunny sack. This area here is burned more than once. It's right along the interstate. So here's an example. This is a Wyoming sagebrush site. This is a crested wheatgrass seeding. This is much older, so the seeding's not in real good shape because the sagebrush has come back in on it. It burns, the crested wheatgrass is released, but if it burns twice, it doesn't look so hot. This will happen if you have a native plant community also. It's not anything special to crested wheatgrass. This just happens to be what we were looking at. So in this 2-time burn, we ended up with the rabbit brush, cheatgrass, and a few perennials left in there. So it can look pretty rough too. This is MLRA 28B. This is the site Cody was talking about where you saw the pictures of the flamethrowers and they had the place lit on fire. Okay. So when we first looked at it, there was a little cheatgrass in here. In our notes, I went back and I looked at our field notes and it said, you know, our field note said, we think this is current potential, but this is the note I put in the field notes, a little more cheatgrass than we like. This was in 2012. And then we did a workshop there. We did a training there last May, and we thought, okay, we'll take them and look at this site. It was in pretty good shape. And we got out of the pickups, and Patty and I and Cody looked at each other and went, oh my God, I feel like I don't have any clothes on. Because we'd already told them this is going to be a great site. And this is what it looked like. And it was just, there was cheatgrass everywhere. It's like, oh, so let's reevaluate this. And so this was the same location two years later. There was no change in grazing management, nothing. So you need to revisit your sites. You know what? You need to go out and look again, and then look again, and then look again. And so that made us reevaluate our state and transition model. And we went back and we put in this state right here, or this community phase right here. I got this up here. Some people complain when you put in what we call hanging phases, where you don't have an arrow from this box to somewhere else. I don't really have a problem with that, because sometimes you just don't know. And I think it's fair to say, I don't know. So we put in this one here that we call the 2.4 phase, because we were on that site. The native bunch grasses were there, but the annual non-native species were subdominant, but there was a lot of them. They weren't trace, but they also weren't, it wasn't an annual state where we didn't really have very many native plants. We had quite a few native species there, and we think this is a climate-driven event. We had a lot of spring moisture, and the annuals went yee-haw, and they germinated and they showed up. And there are going to be days or years when you walk out there and that happens. There are going to be other years when you walk out there and you didn't have the spring moisture and the annuals aren't going to have done as well. And then perennials are. We need to recognize when that happens so that we don't get our underwear in a knot all the time. So we don't blame it on something like, I don't know, livestock grazing or something. But this exists out there, and I want to put it in these models where we know we see it, and it tends to be in that like 10 to 14 inch precip zone. That tends to be where we're seeing it. And I've talked to enough ecologists that are working, range people that are working, that they're in agreement. And so we're putting it in, realizing it's very risky. If this site burns, it could be a real disaster. But recognizing that it's there, and that this may be an appropriate place to do some serious thought about using livestock to reduce some of this problem if you use it correctly. So there are differences in MLRA differences. I want you guys to have that as a take-home message. Resilience varies by these MLRAs: soils, precipitation patterns, fire frequency. That pre-fire vegetation communities are important to know what's out there. Fire severity matters on response. How hot was that fire? Which also comes back to what is your pre-fire vegetation community? Timing of fire, summer and fall. Did you have a little rain event before that fire came through? That changes how hot that fire burns. Post-fire precipitation. You know, what's the next year like? What's your growing season like? And then post-fire management. What's your grazing management like? And Devin's going to talk to you a little bit about that a little later. I'll skip that one. And are there any questions? Do we have time?
No.
We don't have any time. No time.